Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Why 2014 is the Year for Video Conferencing. I'm Kurt Weisenberger, your webinar moderator for today. Thank you for joining us. Before I introduce our featured speakers, let's go over some brief housekeeping. We are recording today's event, so if you registered, you can come back and access this webinar on demand at any time, and we'll email you the link as soon as the archive is available. You can also download the slides at any time using the Download Slides button in the bottom of your ON24 console. And this webinar is about your participation, so we will have a live question and answer session at the end of today's webinar. And you can send in your questions at any time during the presentation using the Q&A button in the ON24 console, or you can tweet them to us by using hashtag LSWebinar, or email them to us at simonsays@lifesize.com. And now, I'm pleased to introduce our first featured speaker, Mr. Howard Lichtman, a visual collaboration-focused technologist, author, publisher, and consultant with specialties in telepresence, video conferencing, and visual collaboration to improve organizational and personal productivity. Howard is the founder and president of the Human Productivity Lab, an independent consultancy and research firm that helps organizations design telepresence strategies and deploy telepresence solutions. Howard is also the editor-in-chief of Telepresence Options magazine and the monthly Telepresence Options Telegraph, the world's most widely read publications focused on telepresence, video conferencing, and visual collaboration technologies. Thanks for being here, Howard. Our second featured speaker today is Mr. Simon Dudley, video evangelist for LifeSize. Simon is an executive with more than 20 years of experience in the development, sale, and marketing of high technology products. In his role as video evangelist, Simon is the spokesperson for LifeSize, and he evangelizes how video communications can help drive social collaboration and accelerate business success. Simon holds 3 patents awarded during his time at LifeSize Communications as part of his work helping to design the world's first high-definition video conferencing solution. It's great to have you here, Simon. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to you, Simon and Howard. Take it away, guys.
Thank you, Kurt, and welcome everyone to the LifeSize Howard Lichtman show. It should be an interesting half hour or so of our predictions for 2014. And we do hope, one, that we're contentious, secondly, that we're entertaining, and thirdly, perhaps informing enough to make it worth your while. So Howard, welcome to the event. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and where you're from and what you're all about?
So my name is Howard Lichtman, and I run a consultancy in visual collaboration that works with organizations looking to deploy telepresence, video conferencing, unified communications, and visual collaboration tools. And I also publish Telepresence Options, which is the most read publication following visual collaboration in the industry. And I'm also a principal in a startup called Array Telepresence. So I wear a lot of different hats, and I will be switching between them frequently during the next half hour.
That's great. And how do we find you? What's the best way of getting communication with you after this event?
HumanProductivityLab.com or TelepresenceOptions.com, and my email is hsl at either of those URLs.
Excellent. So I'm Simon Dudley. I'm LifeSize's video evangelist, and it's my remarkable job to go along, and it is a remarkable job, to go along and tell people why they want to buy video communications technology. I try as much as possible not to get too into the weeds about specific products, although I can if I need to. And I do, as a matter of course, try and keep myself above the manufacturer's freight. Of course I have a vested interest in the success of LifeSize, because one, I believe in it, and two, they pay me. So it's all part of that great symbiotic relationship. But equally, I do try and be as open and reasonable as possible. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk through some of the big mega trends that are happening in the IT industry, and then we'll talk about how some of those trends will affect the video conferencing industry specifically during 2014. It's going to be an interesting year, we think, and let's get into it. Howard, everyone seems to have a smartphone now, but it isn't actually true. Although it's funny, I go to conferences all the time and say, who here's got anything other than a smartphone? There's always one person. I'm going to be speaking to 8 people or 600, and there's one guy who's got a flip phone still. But of course, in much of the world, they don't have smartphones as yet. And the quality and the cost of smartphones is dropping through the floor. In fact, people are already producing full 1080p displayed 5, 6, 7-inch, what I would class phablets. These devices, and that seems to be a big trend this year too, the idea of moving from either a tablet gets smaller and smaller and a phone gets bigger and bigger, and it looks to me like they're going to merge. This phablet concept, a truly horrible word, which I suspect will catch on. And I think that that will have an effect. I think that people are going to use phablets and the cost is going to drop. So the number of people using smartphones or phablets or tablets or whatever you call those devices in that middle ground is going to explode. I'm quite excited about that. What's your thoughts?
So I agree, and I actually disagree with almost with the term of calling it a smartphone, because what it really is, it's a computer in your pocket. And having a computer in your pocket allows you to do a variety of things that you can't do with a phone. And so telephony really is just an application running on a data network. And so the ability to put a low-cost, high-quality computer into your pocket it has really revolutionized how most people work and how they get around and do things in their daily life, from being able to navigate using GPS, being able to video conference and join conference calls, to call for free instead of having to pay outrageous long distance costs. That's only going to improve. And as the phablet grows, with respect to our industry, you're going to see more and more people using it to participate in video conferences from the car before their next meeting, from the airport. And so that, married with some of these cloud-based interoperability technologies that we're going to talk about a little later, is going to really bring video and make it mobile in a way that's going to be more compelling than just on a little tiny smartphone screen.
Yeah, I agree and I disagree. So just so everyone understands Howard's position here, you want people putting a 7-inch phablet in their pocket before making a call while in the car. I'm very scared by some of that. That's people texting is bad enough. Doing a video call on the way to the hopefully they'll not be driving the car. I have
done video. I've never done it myself, but I've been on video conferences where someone is video conferencing from the car while driving on numerous occasions.
Yeah, well, they're normally driving over me while in Texas, like they did last year. I don't think the woman was texting, but I have no proof one way or the other. It was not the best afternoon of my life. So, but I do agree on a sort of serious note. I mean, the experience on a 7-inch tablet or a 6-inch tablet, phablet, phone, computer, whatever you define that as, is going to be so much richer than it could ever be on a 3.5 or 3-inch display, as many of the small phones are today, that I think it'll change things completely. It's interesting to me that your average smartphone user, as they are today, looks at their phone 140 times a day. So are they going to pull a phablet out? Well, maybe there'll be another device, maybe the iWatch or the Pebble or the other devices that will fit on a wrist will be the first glance. What am I doing? And then if I need to, I'll pull out the phablet. And I think that device can then be bigger. One of the points that Apple has always had is that the iPhone is one-handed, and you can't use a phablet one-handed. Some of them you can barely lift with one hand. So you definitely need two hands on that device. I think it's going to be an interesting year. I don't know that it affects the video conferencing industry directly, this particular point. But I think it's interesting to me that, Howard, you and I are of a generation where we started on, well, probably no computer in our office, and then we went to a PC, and then we went to a laptop, and then we now probably carry a combination of devices. We carry laptops and tablets and mobile devices, and I think that that's going to go away. I think that the vast majority of the people coming into the world now are going to have one computer, and it'll be their mobile device. I mean, you could argue it already is. And it's interesting that instead of being a device that kind of tethers to a desktop or a laptop computer, it will be the entire computer. As you've already suggested, we're going to talk about the effects of cloud computing on that world and how that will affect mobile devices later. But I think it's going to be a fascinating journey, and I think it probably starts very dramatically in 2014.
Well, yes, and just to add to that, I'll add a couple of thoughts. The winner in the wearable world is not going to be Google Glass, in my opinion. In fact, I think you're going to see the term glass hole grow in popularity, because people just don't want, people are somewhat offended by having being recorded, or having the potential of being recorded. And so I think that that's ultimately going to be kind of shot down by social norms and by polite society, et cetera. And so I think that the big winner in the wearable market, without a doubt, is going to be the watch, for exactly the reason that you outlined, is that people are reaching for their phone 140 times a day. And the ability just to take a look at that watch and say, do I need to respond to that email? Do I need to respond to that text? And then being able to do so by speaking to it and never having to take the computer out of your pocket. I think that the watch ends up being the big winner in the wearable market, and I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. And by the way, the watch, I mean, I'm a Fitbit user. Fascinating technology, measures the number of steps and how much exercise I'm getting and all these things. And just measuring it, by the way, makes you use it more, because it will sit there and say, oh, well, you've done 9,000 steps a day and you said you do 10. Oh, well, I better go out for a walk then. And it actually improves your life. This telemetry stuff, this Internet of Things, coupled with watch technology, I think will be dramatic. I mean, certainly, if you could give a kid a watch that they couldn't take off, or you told them never to take off, you'd know where they are all the time. I accept that, frankly, most kids can never be pried away from their smartphone, but it will become even easier if it's on a watch type technology. I think it's an interesting.
Without a doubt, Fitbit is dead. The watch will kill Fitbit the same way that the smartphone killed the Flip.
So we've got these mobile devices, we've got this high-end telepresence type technology. What's next? Well, you've obviously got to have a decent internet connection between the device and the rest of the world, between you and the internet. Now, 4G has been in the US for a while, but they're beginning to fill in the gaps. So 4G you're lucky to get 4G, and even today I look at my phone and go, oh, I've got 4G, and it seems to run a bit faster. But with the rise of the cloud computing technologies, the link to the internet, to the one computer in the world that we all call the internet today, is going to become ever more important. And of course, Europe's been a bit behind. It was way ahead of the US, for example, on 3G technology. But for 4G, I think that the cost of the 3G technologies meant that the telcos milked that technology for as long as they could. So they didn't push 4G until they absolutely had to. And now Europe is getting 4G en masse. Europe has some major advantages over the US in that it's 570 million people in an area smaller than the USA. So their population density is much higher, and as a result, 4G actually is going to be easier for them to roll out. It's still going to be expensive, but I think that will allow all these mobile devices for the first time not to have to worry about, oh, am I in a mobile hotspot, or have I got a Wi-Fi connection before I can get an experience worth having. So from our point of view, it's great, because video conferencing and video communications technology will be available to those beautiful 7-inch 1080p high definition displays to anyone pretty much anywhere, unless they're really out in the back of beyond.
So I'm going to agree with you on almost all of that, except the part where you said that it was going to be expensive. Because if you take a look at all of the underlying technologies, connectivity technologies, dense wave multiplexing, being able to use more and more colors of light on a single strand of fiber, whether you take a look at the amount of different applications and service providers that a single tower can support, if you take a look at the improvement in the interconnection between the different providers that's going on in the world as the number of carrier neutral co-location facilities increases and improves, I think you're going to see the cost of connectivity going down as much as you're seeing the cost of these other devices go down. And so, it really becomes a virtuous cycle where you get more and more applications are driving more and more people to subscribe to 4G services, more providers are coming in, and so I think you're going to have quality network everywhere, and it's going to continue to drop in cost.
Okay, right. We can. This is great. We can agree to disagree because I agree with everything you said, but you said reduce the cost, and I think it will. To the carriers, it absolutely will. Whether they pass that on to the consumers, particularly in 2014, I think is yet to be proven. I mean, one could argue that the cost of international phone calls has dropped, and it has, by the way, over the last 40 years, to the carriers by a factor of about 1 million. Well, international phone calls didn't get 1 million times cheaper. I think it would be interesting. Well, you could argue now that they've become free, but that's all then bundled up with the whole net neutrality issue and how Verizon and AT&T. It'll be interesting to see on a global basis, not just with those players in the US, how the competition rules allow these organizations to effectively own markets. And if they own a market, they'll be disinclined to pass on those cost savings. I hope you're right. You're more utopian than I am on this technology. I'm a little bit more dystopian.
I don't necessarily think it might happen in 2014, but ultimately the cost will drop dramatically.
I genuinely hope you're right. The net neutrality issues and that going through the courts and Verizon and AT&T and them effectively turning themselves back into the old AT&T is concerning for me. I hope you're right. I guess time will tell. So Howard, all this stuff about utility, let's talk about utility of networks, right? We've now got the situation where we both agree that 2014 is going to be big for tablets or phablets or big phones or however you define that. We know that 4G networks are going to make people more available, and we know that the cost of the technology is going to drop through the floor. So billions more people, or hundreds of millions more people perhaps as a minimum, will get access to this technology like never before. What do we think that effect will have on the video communications business generally?
So I think it's going to drive utility through the roof. And my short definition of visual collaboration utility is who you can reach and what you do with video endpoints, whether those are hard-based endpoints or soft clients or web apps, or smartphone apps, et cetera. However it's being used and consumed, what can you do and who can you reach? And that utility is going through the roof, and it's happening through a convergence of a number of trends and technologies, including what we just discussed with the improvement in 4G networks, the improvement in interconnection between carriers that improves the quality of service to support video on diverse networks. It includes the rise of cloud-based interoperability platforms that number one, allow small to medium enterprises to deploy video at a fraction of the cost of having to stand up hardware-based video network solutions. It improves the utility of who can be reached by solving the interoperability issues of connecting standards-based traditional video conferencing to consumer and prosumer services like Skype and Uvu and a gazillion others. It's an improvement. It's adding high quality cameras to smartphones, tablets, phablets with the processors needed to support video. It's a growing acceptance of video in as the millennials come on board that have been raised using video to talk to their friends. There's more of a kind of a comfortableness with it. And it's becoming pervasive. The collaboration tools for working with data have improved, and so the fact that you get so many benefits with video, you're increasing the retention, you're increasing the comprehension over and above a simple telephone call, married with ubiquity, ease of use, not having to worry about interoperability issues, and not having to stand up expensive hardware-based video conferencing infrastructure. All the signs point to growing utility, growing adoption, and indeed we're seeing that, and it's really starting to converge. And the industry said it before, but I think 2014 is the year that video comes into its prime.
I do hope so. I've been waiting 20 years for this particular bandwagon to take off, if wagons take off, but it's. I hope you're right. Now, there's two rules. I always quote Moore's law, right? The utility of a network goes up at the square of the number of nodes within it. I think we could very few people would argue that that is a very powerful rule. But you brought up to me earlier today Reed's law, which is one I wasn't aware of previously. So do you want to give us a general definition of what that is and how that's going to affect our industry?
Sure. So David Reed was also an internet graybeard. He helped found the Media Lab at MIT, and he had a corollary to Metcalfe's law called Reed's law, where essentially he said, Metcalfe was right. The value of a network is the sum of the nodes squared, and the more nodes you add to a network, the more valuable it becomes. But what he noticed, and I think probably Metcalfe would agree with him as well, is that there are certain networks that are more valuable than other networks, and he called these networks group-forming networks. And to simplify things, a group-forming network is a network in which a single node is not just an active node, but it's inviting in other nodes into the network, which allows it to grow very, very quickly, and not just grow quickly numerically, but also the value of the network grows. Yeah. And so the example that most people are familiar with is probably LinkedIn or Facebook, where they're inviting in that each person that joins Facebook has the ability to invite in other members of Facebook, and as they join, they invite in their friends, and that allowed Facebook and LinkedIn to grow very, very rapidly and build value very, very rapidly. Well, visual collaboration is also a group-forming network in the sense that more people that are using it are inviting in their customers, their business partners, their vendors, supply chain, demand chain. And so as visual collaboration networks grow and more and more companies adopt, it creates a virtuous cycle of inviting in and doing business with your partners, your vendors, and your customers. And so we're going to see that we're seeing that take effect, and it's only accelerating the value of being able of who you can reach and what you can do.
I think it's a fascinating point, and I'd actually lived that life. And by the way, I think I said Moore's law, and of course I meant Metcalfe. You're completely right. Moore has lots to do with numbers of ICs on processors and nothing to do with network sizes. So apologies if I said Moore's law earlier. Metcalfe. And I'd already thought about Metcalfe's law when I was selling fax machines, back in the mid to late 80s, a long, long time ago now. And that market went from 60,000 units a year to 1 million units a year in 2 years, because people like me went round to ask customers, right, you've had your fax machine for 6 weeks now, who would it benefit you if they owned one? And of course you would typically point out that if your customers also had a fax machine, they could fax their orders to you more quickly than they could and more easily if they sent you a letter with the order in. And it was transformational to businesses. So what happened was that your customers became your best salespeople, because they had a enlightened self-interest to get other people involved in the network, and that fits perfectly with Reed's law. I don't feel the video conferencing industry has done a good job of that until now, because the video conferencing industry has traditionally been a Fortune 5000 or maybe Fortune 500 centric business, and almost all of those organizations talk to themselves. And although Metcalfe's law may be of use there, Reed's law is probably not. But as we're moving the video conferencing market, the video communications market, however you define that to be, into the mid-market, then I think that Reed's law, that enlightened self-interest of getting other people into the network, is going to become incredibly compelling. I'm actually genuinely excited after 21 years in the video conferencing industry that we might be on the cusp of something very exciting this year.
I agree. One quick question. What is a fax machine?
Well, you say that, right? So I looked this up. No one uses fax anymore, do they? I mean, it's a dead technology. It's horrible stuff, rubbish. Last year, 15 million fax machines were sold globally.
I bet they're sold as multifunction machines.
Yes, mainly, and well done. Yes, you've kicked a hole in my stained glass window with that. But it had its day. We'll see. You could argue the same about email. Is email going to go away under a pressure of Messenger? I don't know. Maybe. And perhaps it is a mega trend in 2014, but I can't work out how that has any effect on video conferencing, and we are limited for time. So we'll move on. It had its day. I made good money selling fax machines. They $10,000 each, weighed 100 pounds. They were great then. Not so good now, perhaps. Right, now another one. It's a big topic. I think we're going to be relatively quick with this one, not because it's not important, but because I've already spoken about it at length. Howard, I know you have in many other locations, and there's already a lot of data out there about this, but WebRTC. In fact, Casey King and I did a full 45-minute webinar about WebRTC, and that could be available elsewhere. And Howard, I know you've spoken extensively about the technology. So I'm not going to make this a long one because we could take 2 hours over this. WebRTC, I know we'll agree on this, it's obvious. The whole idea of having a weightless video conferencing client built into a browser, it isn't nirvana because you need infrastructure in the middle. It isn't nirvana because the quality isn't as good as a true client yet. But of course, it's going to take over the world for millions of users, no question. I mean, I'm not even certain we've got more to say than that, surely.
So I'm a proponent, and I'm excited about what it brings. It solves the installation issue. People being able to use video when they can't install a software many times on a lockdown corporate laptop or a corporate PC. And so I think it has a variety of it has good potential. What I've been surprised about is I was having a conversation with the CEO of one of the important visual collaboration companies in our industry, and he rattled off a number of reasons of why WebRTC was not as important as everybody thinks that it's going to be, and it shocked and it amazed me. And he had very cogent, arguments. And just to kind of summarize a couple of them,
please, number one, because I can't imagine that this is anything other than nirvana of which you speak.
So he pointed out the fact that because it's an open standard, there's really no opportunity for small startups to build intellectual property in the space. He pointed out the fact that they don't even have a standard yet, and that it's so simple that his company is just waiting until they develop a standard. And he says he'll write the code in half a day himself. It's so kind of simple and easy to use. And that's just a couple of those. So it may not be the panacea that everybody's hoping for. It's definitely going to be important. But it's really, and if there's one thing that he said is, I don't think it's going to have huge traction until a standard does develop that lets all of the different browsers adopt without having to make investments that may turn out to be worthless. And so I look at WebRTC that is a promising technology that is on the cusp until a standard develops where all the browsers can adopt. And that leads to more ubiquity. But without a doubt, it's just going to drive the need for video network infrastructure, cloud-based interoperability providers. It is a tool, but it only becomes important when you have quality video network infrastructure in the network to support that particular connection to the rest of the conference.
Yeah, look, so I agree with everything you said at the end, and I disagree with everything you said at the beginning. So the gentleman you were talking to, and I know, and just for everyone's edification, Howard was not at liberty to share with me who it is, and I'm not going to guess. But I'll tell you this, their statements sound self-serving to me. There's that sense of, there's no intellectual property in it. You know how much users care about intellectual property? They don't care. They just want a tool that works. Whether somebody's making a ton of money out the back of it and whether it fits somebody's existing business worldview, I don't think matters. It's a little bit, my grandparents, I'll give you an example. My grandparents, or technically my great-grandparents, made a lot of money making cartwheels, wooden cartwheels at the turn of the century in central London. Well, in 1900, they were making money hand over fist. Making cartwheels is hard. By 1920, these annoying things called motor cars were driving around with steel wheels, rubber tyres on them. By 1930, their business was bankrupt and they were living in poverty. And there were 8 of them living in 2 rooms which they shared the bathroom with 8 other families. We're talking real poverty here. And I think that you could argue that the position of this gentleman is not dissimilar to that, in that, well, it doesn't fit my worldview and the code's easy to write and everyone's waiting. Well, don't get me wrong, it's got its problems, right? There isn't as much interoperability. Large parts of the browser world don't cope with it. It's Google versus Apple versus Microsoft, which means it's got nothing to do with the technology and everything to do with their war of religion that all three of them like to have with each other. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting it's a panacea, but I don't believe that technologies don't take off because they don't fit somebody else's worldview. We're going
to examine the pros and the cons in the next issue of Telepresence Options magazine. So stay tuned for the complete case, for and against.
Okay, well, just to let you know, I'm really pro. But people, and I've had this said to me, oh, well, video conferencing is now built into a browser, therefore I don't need video conferencing, you're dead. And we're like, well, all right then, who are you going to ring? And you need something in the middle to meet. And I think that's part of it. The other part of it is that a web browser-based video conferencing technology for the occasional user is great. But if you're a power user, Howard, you're on video hours every day, I'm sure I am. I use a video conferencing codec in my office, as I am right now, and you're using a software client on your laptop. But you wouldn't replace that with a web browser application. But if you're my mum, who makes, well, actually my mum's quite a big power user of video conferencing because she lives in the UK and talks to me every Sunday and happens to have a LifeSize endpoint in her house. But for many other people's parents, or for people who aren't regular video users, WebRTC is great, but it's only part of the answer. I think it's going to be a fascinating year, and once it gets onto mobile devices, which it isn't in any meaningful way yet, I think it's going to be even bigger. So I said that we wouldn't talk about WebRTC for much, and then we spent 5 minutes on it, but I think it's an important topic, and I think it's going to be very interesting. So those are our top predictions for the year. I think it's going to be an exciting year, probably one of the most exciting years in video conferencing for the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, and maybe I'm self-serving here, but when LifeSize introduced high-definition video conferencing those years back in 2005, I think that fundamentally changed the video conferencing industry. I think other things have evolved over time, the drop of ISDN, the ubiquity of endpoints, the use of mobile. But I think that a bunch of forces, bigger mobile devices, better networks, cheaper endpoints, WebRTC, the read effect, they're all going to coalesce in 2014 to really drive the adoption of video throughout what really matters in the industry, which is, or to industry generally, which is that mid-market. The Fortune 500 have had it for 15 years, and all they did was spend less on it because the codecs cost less. But they didn't mass deploy, not really. I mean, hundreds of endpoints, but not tens of thousands. I think the mid-market, with that read effect of talking to their supply chain, is going to have some dramatic effects on our industry this year. It's going to be really exciting. I'm looking forward to it. And of course,
as am I.
Howard, I'm going to invite you back. In fact, I'll do it live on air now. I'm going to invite you back. Let's do this in early January 2015, and we'll review this, and then we'll see if we got anything right. Of course, we could always pretend we're a proper analyst who can just write anything, and then when the predictions don't come out to be true, then hey, we could just say, the numbers changed. That's how most of the big players work.
I'm putting it in my book. I look forward to it.
That would be great. So, telepresence is dead. Long live telepresence. Now, my opinion has been that telepresence was a niche of a niche market for a long time, and then some big guys in blue coats came along and invented super expensive, high-end video conferencing that drove lots of router traffic, and then that died. So I think it's already dead, but I think you've got some sort of other opinion on this. Do you want to enlighten us on your position here?
I do, without a doubt, and I think that part of the issue has been that the industry and some of the analyst community has glommed on to the position that telepresence is about $300,000 3-screen group telepresence environments made by people like LifeSize and Cisco and Polycom and Avaya and others. When the reality is that the root term is to be telepresent with people otherwise, and our term for telepresence conferencing at the Human Productivity Lab is visual collaboration solutions that address the human factors of participants and try to replicate as closely as possible an in-person experience. Now, you can do that in a $300,000 room, but on the low end, you can do that by getting the lighting right and the acoustics right and having a clean network and using a variety of industry best practices. But I would strongly suggest that not only is telepresence not dead, there might be some saturation in the $300,000 room market of we'll say the vendors that are most associated with the term right now. But what we believe and what we're seeing and to a certain degree when I put on my Array telepresence hat, we're making happen is a number of technologies are coming to the fore that will improve the human factors of participants, improve their end user acceptance of visual communications, which improves the usage, which improves the ROI for the companies that deploy these solutions. And this is really the first time that I've talked about this in a public forum, but I'm going to give you an example that we're doing at Array Technology, where we've developed a camera technology and a black box filled with FPGA chips and geometry processing chips that takes the furthest participants in a traditional video conferencing room done in an elongated table, which we estimate is about 70% of the market, and we warp the image before it goes into the codec. And it can go into any codec. It works with a LifeSize codec, a Polycom codec, a Cisco codec, and a VIA codec, a Clear One codec. It doesn't matter. It's agnostic. It's an HD MI or HDCI input into the codec. And before it goes into compression and we send it across the wire, we do a number of things that improve the experience for the end user. We bring the furthest participants up close and personal. We improve the amount of pixels on the face by 6.5 times for the furthest participant. We improve the format of them, so you go from having progressively smaller people with little tiny potato heads at the far end of the table to we equalize the size of the participant, and we move it from a shooting down the bowling alley format into an across the table format. We add stand-up capture. We improve the eye line by 14%, so the vertical eye line is almost dead on. Compared to a 3-screen telepresence environment, we improve we have a 50% improvement in the horizontal eye line, and we're able to power dual displays that then capture a wide format, give the participants a wide format view, which improves immersion at the right aspect ratio of the human eye to create a meeting experience that rivals $300,000 group telepresence systems, and we do that for $12,000 plus the cost of the second display, and we're able to power two dual displays with a single codec, so there's no impact on the network. This is, I'm self-interested, obviously, but I mean, this really is one example of how technology is going to continue to improve the human factors of the visual collaboration experience, and is going to drive usage and ultimately the return on investment that companies make in visual collaboration.
It's funny, I've always felt, and that's fascinating, and I would be interested to see this technology when we're in a position to show it off. It's interesting to me that in my experience, telepresence is really, it's a renaming of video conferencing, because for such a long time it had a horribly bad name. And I personally think that telepresence is really video conferencing that people actually want to use. So I do agree with you that human factors are going to be an important part. It's interesting, you can get all the technology right, but if you have backlit windows and poor lighting and microphones poorly set up and lossy networks and all those things, it simply ruins the effect. And video conferencing is very much one of those technologies that, unless you've broken that spell of not being there, it needs to be look through a window quality. If you haven't managed that, then video conferencing falls apart. So I think that some of the things that you're looking to do, anything that improves that I feel that the person's in the room with me, can be nothing other than a good thing. It's going to be exciting to see how that gets on this year, and I wish you luck with it.
On that, we agree.
There you go. So here's a prediction for you for 2014, Howard. I don't know how searing an insight this is, but I strongly predict it's going to be true. The video conferencing industry will continue to be stunned by its own brilliance and continue to tell everyone how fantastic their technology is, rather than tell people how useful their technology is. Thoughts?
Agreement yet again. And so I've long said that the industry is sometimes the victim of its own excitement over what I occasionally refer to as a geek science fair project. The industry can take video, it can compress it, and it can send it across the wire, and it can decompress it, and then they go, look, we can do it for $5,000, we can do it for $3,000, progressively smaller sums, and business goes, yawns and says, that's not what I want to do. I want to work with people in far places as if I'm in the same room. I want exciting technologies that improve the ability to collaborate on data. I want to whiteboard interactively with people across the sea. I want to take a look at electronic components at a microscopic scale. And so that ability to compress and transmit and decompress video is only one aspect of the solutions that are ultimately going in the marketplace.
We're so clever in that business. Do you understand how important that technology is? I was on a panel discussion at one of the big shows last year. Even if I can remember it, I should probably not say. And I was next to the CEO of one of the big players in the video business. And he was going on and on and on about how his particular algorithm did this, that, and the other, and it was more thing. And I of course, did a Vox Populi quick straw poll of probably 200 people in the room. I said, who here actually understands how that technology works? Nobody put their hand up. And then I said, and who cares how it works? And nobody put their hand up. So I know that you do this a lot, and I certainly endeavor to do this. I try and get away from the conversation about how clever we are and talk about what we could do that would improve people's lives. And that sounds a bit altruistic, and it's not meant to be, but, well, I suppose it is meant to be, but I'm not meant to come out, I don't want to come over as some sort of zealot trying to get everyone to stop flying or driving or, do all the other things to travel to meetings. But I genuinely believe that video conferencing does improve people's lives. Their quality of life is improved if they use the technology. And I think we as an industry that keep going on about how it works, and the little widget that we've got this week that will do this, and the other guy hasn't got it, but he'll have it in 2 weeks from now, is so irrelevant that we as an industry have done ourselves a real bad disservice. I've tried, at least within this organization, to affect that. I hope, if not a prediction, a hope is that the rest of the industry gets on board with that in 2014 and realizes that people don't care how it works. They want to know what it does. They don't want to know how it does it. All right, Howard, thanks again. Been a fascinating talk. I hope that everyone finds it interesting. We're going to take this as a series of Q&A. So Howard and I will be on the phones, and we would be delighted in feedback, in thoughts, in predictions, in contrary opinions. There's nothing I like more than the contrary opinion. They're great fun. I like picking those apart, or attempting to. So thank you very much for your time. It's been an exciting day, and we look forward to talking to you on the phone.